Wind swept through the skyscrapers under Boston's gray winter sky. Betsy Morrison left the publishing house's high-rise building and hurried toward the subway station, hunching against the cold. As the senior editor at Northeast Publishing, she had significantly grown the company's literary division over the past 5 years. Her phone rang, and she saw it was her husband Greg. A history professor at Boston University, he was calling to say he could come home early today. "I'll pick up the kids from school and start dinner," Greg's warm voice reached Betsy's ear. "Thank you, that's such a help," she replied with a smile. "I'm feeling a little nervous about dinner at my parents' house tomorrow." "It'll be fine. Ellie and Tom are looking forward to seeing their grandparents, and you should relax on the weekends." Betsy agreed. Her family, husband Greg and their children, 8-year-old Ellie and 5-year-old Tom, were the foundation of her life. Amid her busy days, time with family was a treasure beyond compare. On the subway, Betsy thought about tomorrow's dinner at her parents' house. Martha and Walter lived in a stately home in Chestnut Hill, a Boston suburb. Her father Walter was a retired lawyer, and her mother Martha was active in local charities. Betsy's sister Laura was single and lived about 10 minutes by car from their parents' home. Though busy with her job at an advertising agency, she saw their parents frequently. Betsy, meanwhile, was caught up with her publishing work and raising 2 children, leaving her little time to visit her parents. Their phone conversations were typically brief and superficial. It had been 3 months since Betsy last visited her parents' home. When her mother called saying, "Let's all have dinner together," she had no reason to decline. Besides, the children were looking forward to seeing their grandparents. Ellie especially loved playing chess with grandfather Walter. When she arrived home, her husband and children were playing a board game in the living room. Ellie's bright laughter echoed throughout the house, and Tom's small hands excitedly knocked over game pieces. The scene warmed Betsy's heart. "Mom!" Both children ran to her. Betsy embraced them tightly. After dinner, while putting the children to bed, Betsy answered Ellie's questions. "What are we going to do at Grandma's house?" "We'll have a delicious dinner, you'll play chess with Grandpa, and we'll all have a good time together." "Will Auntie come too?" Ellie asked. "Yes, Aunt Laura will be there." Ellie looked thoughtful. "Are you and Auntie good friends?" Betsy hesitated for a moment. "Of course. We're sisters." But inside, different emotions were swirling. The next day, when the Morrison family arrived at Martha and Walter's house, Laura's car was already in the driveway. As they opened the front door, they could hear her mother and Laura laughing in the kitchen. "Oh, Betsy! Everyone's here." Martha greeted them. Her eyes were bright, but Betsy noticed how quickly her gaze shifted to the children. "Ellie, Tom, come to Grandma." Martha opened her arms wide to her grandchildren. While the children hugged their grandmother, Betsy exchanged a brief hug with Laura. "It's been a while," Laura said with a smile. "You look well." "Thank you. So do you." In the living room, Walter shook Greg's hand and warmly welcomed the grandchildren. After embracing her father, Betsy surveyed the room. Her mother and Laura were whispering something and giggling together. There was clearly some inside joke between them. "Betsy, could you help me for a moment?" Martha called from the kitchen. As she headed there, Betsy thought she saw her mother and sister conferring about something. When she entered the room, they abruptly stopped talking. "Could you prepare the salad?" Martha asked. Betsy nodded silently and got to work. Shortly after, Laura returned to the kitchen. "Mom, remember George at last week's party?" she said to Martha, laughing. Martha laughed too. "Of course. That was so funny." The two continued their animated conversation, making Betsy feel excluded. She felt a pang of loneliness but told herself, today is about family time. Enjoy it, as she prepared the salad. No matter the distance between them, family was family. As the kitchen conversation continued, Betsy opened the refrigerator and was surprised by what she saw. Martha had prepared numerous special dishes for Laura: chocolate mousse dessert, homemade risotto that Laura loved, and a special grilled vegetable platter. But there was no sign of Betsy's favorites like cheesecake or garlic bread. "Is there anything else I can help with?" Betsy asked calmly. "Thank you, but we're fine. Laura and I have planned the menu," Martha answered over her shoulder. Betsy took a deep breath and tried not to think about the implications of that statement. Back in the living room, Ellie was already playing chess with grandfather Walter. Little Tom was looking at a picture book on Greg's lap. It was a warm family scene, but there was a small cloud in Betsy's heart. "Mom, look!" Ellie exclaimed. "I took Grandpa's queen." Walter smiled and patted his granddaughter's head. "You're really smart, Ellie. Just like your mother." Betsy was a bit surprised by the compliment. It had been a long time since she'd received such straightforward praise from her father. When it was time to set the table, Ellie offered to help Betsy. While folding napkins in the dining room, she whispered, "Mom, Grandma is giving Auntie special smiles." Betsy was surprised by her daughter's keen observation. "Is that so?" Ellie nodded with a serious face. "Yes. But I also saw that you looked lonely." Betsy hugged her daughter. "It's all right, Ellie. Adult relationships can be complicated." Just then, Martha and Laura came out of the kitchen laughing, with Laura holding a special wine. "Betsy, I couldn't find the white wine you like," Martha said. "But we have Laura's favorite red, is that okay?" Betsy smiled. "Of course, anything is fine." As dinner began, the family gathered around the magnificent table. Martha's roast beef was superb. As the conversation progressed, the topic quickly shifted to Laura's recent work success. "Laura landed an amazing new client last week," Martha proudly shared. "Her advertising campaign is the talk of Boston." Walter agreed. "Yes, our little star entrepreneur." Betsy raised her glass toward her sister and said, "Congratulations." Though she had many achievements in the publishing world, her parents barely mentioned them. Greg looked at her and smiled encouragingly. "So, Betsy," Walter finally turned to her. "How are the children's schools?" Betsy felt a little disappointed that the topic had shifted from her work to her children, but she answered cheerfully. "Ellie won an award in a literary contest. And Tom showed real talent at the kindergarten art exhibition." Martha merely nodded slightly before quickly returning to Laura. "Laura, how's the decoration of your new condominium coming along?" As dinner progressed, Betsy felt like a spectator at the table. Only the children seemed to pay genuine attention to her. Ellie especially observed her mother with sensitivity, occasionally showing a worried expression. During the meal, Betsy excused herself to use the bathroom. As she walked down the hallway, she could hear Martha and Laura's voices from the kitchen. She stopped. "Betsy missed so many career opportunities because she had children," Martha's voice said. "She could have become editor-in-chief." "Mom," Laura replied. "I'm really lucky to be able to focus on my career. I don't have time to look after children." "That's right," Martha's voice was gentle. "You can live your life for yourself." "That's what I wanted." Betsy felt a pain in her chest. She began to understand why her mother always favored her sister. Martha saw her own dreams in Laura. Taking a deep breath, Betsy went to the bathroom and then returned to the table, pretending to be calm. In her absence, the conversation had continued to revolve around Laura. Only Greg noticed her return and discreetly took her hand. "Are you okay?" he whispered. Betsy smiled and nodded. Hiding her wounded heart, she continued with the family dinner. "The main dish is here." Martha returned from the kitchen with a beaming smile. She carried a silver tray loaded with perfectly cooked thick steaks. The aroma of juicy meat momentarily eased the tension around the table. "My special New York strip steaks," Martha proudly announced. "Made with special herb butter." Walter stood up to help distribute the plates. "Martha's steaks are the best in town," he said with a smile. "Laura, Betsy, I've prepared especially thick cuts for you sisters." Martha placed luxurious steaks in front of them. They were noticeably larger than those for the rest of the family. Betsy was surprised. At least in terms of food, her mother seemed to be treating her equally. "Thank you, Mom," she smiled. "It looks delicious." Greg gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze, and the children were served appropriately sized steaks. Martha finally sat down at her place, and they began eating. "Mom, can I get some water?" Ellie suddenly stood up. "Of course, but there's still water in your glass," Betsy replied, a bit puzzled. "But the ice has melted." "I want cold water," Ellie explained and headed toward the kitchen. Betsy worried that her daughter might be sensing the tension between her mother and grandparents. Usually sociable Ellie was quieter tonight than usual. A few minutes later, Ellie returned from the kitchen. She walked around the room before sitting down. When passing by Betsy, she made an odd movement, but by the time Betsy turned around, Ellie had already moved near Laura's seat. As Laura lifted her wine glass, Ellie stood beside her and whispered something. Laura looked a bit surprised but quickly smiled. "Mom," Ellie returned to Betsy's side and whispered in her ear. "Now it'll be okay." Betsy was confused. "What will be okay?" Ellie just gave a meaningful look and returned to her seat, quietly beginning to eat her steak. Betsy was concerned about the meaning of her daughter's behavior but couldn't question her in front of the family. As the conversation continued, Betsy stared at the steak in front of her. It looked perfect, seared crispy on the outside, properly medium rare inside. She cut into it and took the first bite. The meat was tender, and the butter and herb flavors were exquisite. "Well, is it good?" Martha asked expectantly. "It's very delicious, Mom," Betsy answered honestly. "Laura, how about yours?" Martha immediately turned to her sister. Laura nodded with a smile. "It's wonderful," she said, taking her second bite. The meal progressed in a pleasant atmosphere, with Walter beginning to ask questions about the grandchildren's school activities. Betsy spoke about Ellie's recent success in the literary contest and was starting to feel more relaxed. About 10 minutes later, a sudden change occurred. "Ha!" Laura exclaimed. Her face was beginning to turn red. "I feel hot." She placed her hand on her chest, clearly showing discomfort. Her breathing became rough, and sweat appeared on her forehead. "Are you okay?" Martha asked worriedly. "I feel a bit nauseous," Laura said, struggling to speak. "My heart feels like it's beating really fast." "Maybe drink some water," Walter suggested. Laura hurriedly reached for her glass and drank, but it didn't seem to help. Everyone at the table looked at Laura with concern. Martha stood up and rubbed her daughter's back. "What happened?" "An allergy." In the midst of the rising tension, Ellie's bright voice broke the silence. "Grandma, that's strange," she said in an innocent voice. "Why is what you put in Mom's steak affecting Auntie?" The room suddenly fell silent. All eyes turned to Ellie. "What?" The color drained from Martha's face. "I saw it," Ellie continued. Grandma sprinkled white powder on Mom's steak in the kitchen. She seemed unaware of the gravity of her statement. So I switched Auntie's and Mom's steaks. I wanted to protect Mom. Walter stood up. His face was contorted with anger and confusion. Martha, what is this about? Betsy was speechless with shock. Her gaze moved from Martha to Laura, and then back to Ellie. In her mind, the fragments of events were beginning to connect. Ellie's long time in the kitchen, her walking around the table, and saying, "Now it'll be okay." Laura now looked completely unwell. She tried to stand up and stumbled. "Bathroom," she said in a hoarse voice. Greg quickly rose to support her. Meanwhile, Martha was frozen like stone. Her face had turned gray, and fear filled her eyes. "Mom." Betsy finally managed to speak. "Is this true?" A silent tension filled the room. Martha's lips trembled, trying to form words, but nothing came out. Her desperate gaze shifted from Betsy to Ellie to Laura. "Martha! Answer!" Walter's voice shook with anger. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at his wife of 40 years. Laura, supported by Greg, was fighting nausea. "Mom, is it true?" Her voice was thin and tinged with the pain of betrayal. Martha shook her head. "No. Ellie must have seen wrong. I would never." "It was white powder," Ellie said firmly. In the frozen silence, the 8-year-old girl's voice was strangely confident. Grandma chose the biggest steak from the silver tray and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then she took powder from a small white bag and sprinkled it over the steak. Afterward, she said, "This is for Betsy." Betsy felt a pain in her chest as she looked at her daughter. Ellie's blue eyes held a mixture of innocence and wisdom. She might not have fully understood the situation, but she had sensed something bad was happening and acted to protect her mother. Greg spoke up. "We should keep the remaining steaks. They can be tested," he calmly said, then looked at Tom. The 5-year-old appeared confused and frightened. "Tom, let's go to the living room. We'll watch some TV." After Tom left with his father, Betsy took a deep breath and turned to Martha. "Mom, why?" Under pressure, Martha finally slumped her shoulders. Her face showed a mixture of fatigue and shame. Her voice faltered. "When you come here, everything always seems perfect. Great job, understanding husband, lovely children. So you try to harm me." Betsy's voice was filled with disbelief. "I wasn't trying to harm you," Martha suddenly cried out. "It was just a laxative. I wanted to make you a little sick so that Laura could." She swallowed her words. "So I could what?" Laura raised her voice. Her condition seemed to be gradually stabilizing, though her face was still red and she was clearly uncomfortable. "I wanted you to shine," Martha admitted, crying. "Betsy has everything. But you stayed here alone, taking care of us. I just wanted to see you in the spotlight for once." Laura was speechless with shock. "Mom, you tried to harm my sister for me." "I wasn't trying to harm her," Martha repeated. "Just weaken her a little." "That is harming, Mom," Betsy said quietly. There was anger within her, but even deeper was a profound sadness. "We're not competitors. We're sisters." Walter was holding his head in his hands. 40 years together, and I never thought you would do something like this." His voice was tinged with deep disappointment. Martha continued to cry. "Every time I see Betsy succeeding, I feel like Laura is being left behind. I loved in the wrong way." Definitely, Laura stood up. She was trembling but trying to stand on her own. "Mom, I'm your daughter, not your project. Hurting my sister to help me, that's not love." Betsy walked over to Ellie and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Ellie. You're truly brave and wise." Ellie looked up at her mother. "Did I do the right thing?" "Yes, you did the right thing." Betsy gently stroked her daughter's hair. "You taught us the true meaning of family bonds." Greg returned from the living room. "Tom is watching TV. I think we should go home now," he said, looking at Betsy. Betsy nodded. "Laura, are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital?" Laura shook her head. "I'll be fine, probably. As Mother said, if it's just a laxative, it should pass in a few hours." She laughed sarcastically. Martha sat slumped at the table, still crying. Walter kept his distance from his wife, unable to hide his confusion and disappointment. "We're leaving now," Betsy said resolutely. "Ellie, could you get Tom? Help him put on his coat." Ellie obediently nodded and headed to the living room. Betsy stared at Martha. She wanted to say something but ultimately swallowed her words. She couldn't forgive yet. And anything she might say now would probably become words she'd regret later. "Betsy!" Martha called out desperately. "Don't say anything now," Betsy replied quietly. "Not now." Laura took her sister's hand. "I'll walk you out," she said weakly. On the way to the entrance, Ellie returned. Tom was already wearing his coat. As the family was about to leave the house, Ellie suddenly stopped and turned around. "Grandma," she said quietly. All the adults in the room focused on her. "Real families protect each other. That's what Mom always teaches us. I'm sad that you forgot that." Those words, though simple, resonated deeply in the hearts of all the adults in the room. Martha began to shed fresh tears, and Walter looked at his granddaughter with amazement at her wisdom. Betsy placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder and quietly left the house. 3 months later, Boston was embraced by the breath of spring. Magnolia trees were beginning to bloom, and the parks were filled with fresh greenery. As the harshness of winter eased, the wounds in the Morrison family were also gradually healing. Betsy gazed out of her office window as she received a phone call from her mother. "Therapy is going well." Martha's voice had a quiet humility that wasn't there before. "The counselor says I might have had tendencies of Munchausen syndrome by proxy." "I see," Betsy replied briefly. Since the incident, she had maintained a certain distance in her relationship with her parents. However, she didn't completely cut ties. Ellie's words, "real families protect each other," remained in her heart. Even in the midst of pain, they were a reason not to sever bonds completely. "Betsy, are you still considering our Christmas dinner invitation?" Martha asked nervously. "I am," Betsy answered honestly. "But I haven't decided yet. I'm discussing it with Greg and the children." After a moment of silence, Martha said in a small voice, "I understand. I'll respect your decision." After ending the call, Betsy returned to her desk. In front of her, alongside her latest editing project, lay a manuscript titled "Healing Families: The Path to Repairing Broken Relationships." After the incident, she had volunteered to edit this book herself. Meanwhile, her relationship with Laura had progressed in an unexpected direction. What was once a superficial sisterly relationship was deepening through their shared wounds. Last week, Laura had visited Betsy's home for the first time and spent time with the children. "It made me think about myself," Laura had confided while sitting on the sofa. "Maybe I was too dependent on Mother. I thought I was living my own life, but perhaps I was just trying to meet her expectations." As Christmas approached, Betsy made her decision. She decided that the whole family would attend dinner at her parents' house. She hadn't completely forgiven, but she didn't want to close the door to the possibility of healing. On Christmas Eve, the Morrison family stood at the Clark family's front door. Ellie and Tom held gifts for their grandparents, excited. Greg gently squeezed Betsy's hand. "Are you okay?" he asked kindly. Betsy nodded. "Yes, I think it's worth trying." The door opened, and Walter greeted them. His face showed relief. In the living room, Martha and Laura were already waiting. Martha had visibly lost weight, and her face showed signs of fatigue, but there was a light of determination in her eyes. "Please, sit down," Martha said before dinner. "I have something I want to say." When everyone was seated, Martha took a deep breath. "First, I want to apologize from the bottom of my heart. Especially to Betsy, and to Laura. I thought I loved you both, but I loved you the wrong way." Her voice was steady. "What I learned in therapy is that I was projecting my own frustrations onto my children. And my expressions of love had become control and manipulation." Laura nodded silently. Betsy listened quietly. "I want to change," Martha continued. "I want to relearn what true affection means." As dinner progressed, the conversation among family members was cautious but gradually regained warmth. Everyone understood that there was still a long way to go for complete forgiveness and healing. During dessert, Ellie addressed her grandmother. "Grandma, are you feeling a little better?" Martha looked into her granddaughter's wise eyes and smiled quietly. "I'm trying, Ellie. I'm trying not to forget what you taught me. That real families protect each other." Betsy heard those words and smiled quietly. She felt that the healing process had begun. Complete forgiveness would take time, but the first step had been taken. She understood that sometimes, protecting means protecting loved ones from oneself. In the car on the way home, Ellie asked, "Mom, will things get better with Grandma?" Betsy gently stroked her daughter's hair. "It will take time, but things will get better. Thanks to you, we've found the right path." As stars shone in the winter night sky, Betsy looked at the road ahead. Family bonds sometimes get hurt and twisted. But she believed that with truth and love, new beginnings are always possible.